Well, I'm happy and honored to be able to say a few things on this Veterans Day weekend. When we did this in the first service, it really kind of looked at my pictures you're about to see and slides, etc., and these are all 50 years old. And most of you weren't even alive yet. So it kind of makes me feel really old seeing these things, but we're going to share a few of them. I have the first picture up, if we will. There we go. This is my friend. He's actually been in that grave for 50 years now. But we met when we first joined the 101st Airborne Division, and when you join a unit, the military always likes to talk about home. Home is everything. You're always looking to get back home. And so the first thing you ask is, where are you from? And he asked me, and I said, I'm from a poor neighborhood in the southern part of Baltimore. And he said, so am I. Well, when we talked, we realized we were only born or grew up about a mile from each other. We didn't know each other at all until then. We probably played a little sandlot baseball together or against opposing teams, but we just became really close. Well, when we got to Vietnam, we were there for roughly 3 weeks, and the first combat mission was assigned to the platoon that Dean belonged to. The evening before, we sat down and just talked about home, and the last words that he said to me were that when we get back home, he will have turned 21. He had just turned 20. He will have turned 21 and be old enough to take me to our local sports bar, basically, and buy me a beer, because he'd be old enough. Well, at that time, we didn't know that he had about 12 hours to live. They went out on the mission. They weren't gone more than a half hour. We heard 4 loud explosions, knew something was drastically bad. Bottom line, he was the only one killed. About 8 or 9 of his other platoon members, and the platoon's about 30 men, were in varying degrees of wounds, mostly severe. I went to see him and just say goodbye. I was able to zip up his body bag and send him back to his mom, but the look on his face was one of more surprise rather than fear or hurt or anything like that. And I took comfort in that over the years, but that look right now, as I talk about this, is as vivid as it was the day I was looking down in that bag. And this is kind of the issues that vets deal with, their mental pictures, for whatever reason that they're forced into that long-term memory, that just never seem to go away. And that was picture number 1. I'm only going to share 3 quick pictures. Picture number 2 would happen about 2 days later. I was assigned then to take over the platoon, get back out, and finish the mission with roughly 2/3 of what was the platoon. I never in my life, for the rest of the war, now we were combat fighters, so I saw a lot of blood, a lot of death, everything, but for the rest of the war, I never saw that much blood in one place. There were craters, obviously from the explosions, and there were literally gallons of blood. All of Dean's blood would have been there, that were 3 to 4 inches thick. It was just, and right now I can just see it. And it was something that all these young men that were with him also then have in the back of their minds now for half a century. This is the only picture I have of Dean's platoon. That's me in the very center, and a friend of mine that took this just called my name, and I looked back, and you can't see in close, but this was a forward area fire base. And we would live in that at night and then go out, for the most part, during the day on search and destroy missions. I shared this earlier, but those of you that know me with water fountains, it's hard for me to pass a water fountain and not stop and take a drink of water. That all happened right here a couple of days after this picture. We were on a 3-day search and destroy mission, and they couldn't get food and water out to us. It was just a little too busy what we were doing, and I was more thirsty than I'd ever been in my life, and to this day, I still have a little bit of an issue of just wanting to get another drink of water. But these same men that saw Dean, be literally blown apart, and then all the blood the next day, and now all this stuff going on. I could spend all afternoon with just things that went on in this fire base. Again, it was just stuff that these young guys. Now, the thing with these young men, at least 3 of them came back home after all this, still teenagers. They went over at 18, came back home at 19. Most of my missions, or some of them anyway, were not all combat oriented. And we were tasked a couple of times to go up and help the people. If we could see the next slide, we should be able to see it. This was up in the city of Hue, Fubai, which was after the Tet Offensive. A village was completely destroyed as far as its market, etc. So we quickly put up, it looks like a flea market, basically. We put up structures like this. There were about 8 of them. You can't see it here, but there were a lot of children around. That was the pleasant part of the war for me, was the interaction with the young children. I mean, they were just so, I have fun with them. I have fun with your children. You'll see it out here almost all the time. I'm doing something that I can to just have fun with the children. But if we could show the picture here of the child there, but this is the typical look of the age group of these young children that I'm about to share with you. We had one more mission to do. It should have been the easiest mission of really the whole war, and that was there was an orphanage that was destroyed during the Tet Offensive, and we were to build just one structure, not 8 like in the marketplace, but just one for these children to have a place to be able to play with a little roof over their heads. Very simple mission for us. Well, we went in and did that. We created it, no problem at all, and I just wish we could have left before. The children just wanted to come back, and I can't, I've thought about them every single week, at least once for the last 50 years. Wondered how many were still alive. Not these, but the ones I'm about to share. In this orphanage, there were about that many children. They were about those ages, from little tiny, like we would have over in the nursery, up through Kids Central. And they just were trying to be kids stuck in a dirty, ugly war, and all wars are dirty and ugly. They wanted the children to come out and thank us. God, I wish they hadn't. Just mangled little bodies. Missing arms, legs, eyes, faces, ears. I never saw such a thing. I can remember saying it back then, and I didn't know the Lord like I know him now, but I said, dear God, don't let the people back home ever have to see anything like this. It was so pathetic. And again, these same young men, it wasn't just me, that were with all of this through Dean's death and through the blood and then also had to see that. So our vets, I'm telling you, we're going to do some things to help the vets here, even in the church, and probably through Celebrate Recovery. But the pictures, the things that won't go away, we just have to deal with. I have learned as a vet, it's best to share that. This is the first time I've shared any of this other than a week ago sharing it with my wife before she would hear it here for the first time. But we have so much in this country to be thankful for. And it's just so easy to take that for granted. I'm not saying any of you do that, but it's through the eyes of people that, and our missionaries see this all the time when they go out to these places with stuff they won't see hopefully that much, but as far as the destruction, but let me go back, I'm about to wrap up. Our final slide or picture is up at Arlington. Now, Dean's grave was the one in the center in the front. The one on the left was a World War II vet. I mean, Arlington's laid out quite interestingly. This was the second time I'd been there, which is, 50 years since Dean was there. First time it took me almost 20 years to work up the courage to just go back and see it. But this is what I noticed on this trip. That grave on the right, that young paratrooper was with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. He died just 6 weeks after he turned 19. Dean died just 6 weeks after he turned 20. And that statement just rings so true to me. The price of freedom is the blood of our youth. And it's just, when I walked around and cried and just was by myself, I mean, you don't see anybody else out there, but most of the graves that I saw from Vietnam were younger even than Dean. And it just, I don't know, it just tears at your heart. But I'm just so thankful to be in such a wonderful church. And, I love my pastor and his family and my church family. And I know you love us vets, and we're going to find some things to do to be able to help some other vets to just share some things. So God bless America. Hug a vet today.